안녕하세요, 슐리예요. 여러분, 오늘 영상에서는 제가 여러분들을 위해 정말 특별한 분을 모시고 이야기를 한번 나누어 보았는데요. 제가 미국에서 일할 때부터 알고 지내던 지인 에이미님이에요. 에이미님은 지금 구글 본사에서 일을 하고 계시고, 그리고 구글 내에서도 정말 일 잘하기로 되게 유명하신 분이거든요. 그래서 제가 한번 꼭 모시고 이야기를 좀 나누어 보고 싶었어요. 그래서 이번 영상에서는 사회 초년생분들, 그리고 20, 30대 여성분들 중에 커리어를 좀 잘 쌓아가고 싶은 분들이 보시면 정말 도움이 될 영상이니까 끝까지 한번 봐주세요. 그럼 바로 시작해 볼게요. 근데 숏헤어가 진짜 잘 어울리신다.
뒷머리가 안 어울려서요.
Hi, Amy. How are you?
Hi, Ashley. Good. How are you?
Thank you for making your time to chat with me today. This is so exciting. I'll finally have you on my show.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I'd always love to chat with you. So.
Thank you. I know you, but can you please introduce yourself to my friends who are watching this?
Hi, Ashley's friend. My name is Amy Yu. I work at Google as a strategy and operations lead and have been with Google for about 6 years now. I've been very fortunate enough to have been in various capacities and various roles across Google, from starting out my career in HR, then sales, and then most recently in operations. I actually started out my career at a national financial services firm called Capital One to share and chat with Ashley around some of my experiences and my own lessons learned. And so, it's such a pleasure.
Oh, wow. You've done a lot. You went from New York to California, and you moved from finance industry to tech industry. How did you do that? What was that transition like? Did you know anybody there, or what got you into Google and tech industry in general?
So I honestly thought when I first started out my career at Capital One that I was going to be a so-called lifer there, right? I loved working for that company. I really appreciated all the investment that they had made for my career-wise. But at one point, I realized that I was getting really comfortable in my environment and within my own network. And so when I was ready to make the jump, I actually opened up to her and said, hey, I think I'm ready for a change. The opportunities that I've had at Capital One. But unfortunately at the time, we didn't have as much of a presence in California. And so I didn't want to compromise my career over my personal goals of moving out to the West Coast. And luckily, she actually had her old boss, who was her mentor, who worked at Google. So she made an introduction, put in a really good word, and things just stars aligned itself together. And at the time, she was just growing out her team and had a right position at the right time. And so I went out and applied for the role, and went through the process and got the job.
It's amazing. So you essentially got the role because you kept in contact with your old boss, right?
Well, absolutely. And in fact, she was actually my boss at the time. So I was working for that boss.
So that was, you really just honestly just opened up to her and say, hey, I'm ready to change.
And to be honest, I think I was just very lucky to have had a boss that was just so open-minded and so focused in my personal growth as well. So I think in many cases, I also lucked out too.
And you had a really good relationship with your manager. That's how it made it possible. So what was the interview process like after you applied? Google is really well known to have a tough interview process, right?
I'll be honest. It was daunting, but at the same time, it was super fun. Super fun because I didn't really know what to expect because it's Google. It had the brand recognition. And so I took it as more of a learning experience and really focused on how do I take this opportunity to really market myself and position myself in the best way possible. I still had a first round of a resume review process. And then once you pass through that review process, you get then passed on to a recruiter for a short phone screen interview, talk you through and ask you some questions around your experiences, your potential fit for the role. And then after that, once you are deemed as a right candidate for those positions, you go through then the official first round interview with the hiring manager. to then understand what that person's capacity and candidacy fits into that particular role and the team. I was then brought on for an on-site interview, which basically takes you through an entire day with series of interviews which involves team members of the same team that you're applying the role into. And some cross-functional interviewers that want to make sure that you're not only a good fit for this particular role, but you're still tested on other capacities, such as Googliness, to make sure that you are fit for the company as a whole. And then, of course, there are also like small luncheons and coffee chats that you do across other team members as well as recruiters that look for other well-roundedness of who you are as a person. And so once you go through that, and they decide, hey, we think you are the right candidate, you then have to go through what's called a hiring committee, where even if all the people who had interviewed you think you are the best fit, they still want to make sure that they are going through and having an objective person's point of view to assess your overall fit for the company and the position and the team. So, it was a pretty long process and, quite cumbersome in some ways, but yeah.
How long did that take, the whole process?
I think it took a couple months.
Couple months. Wow. So even if you just excel in the interviews, like if the hiring committee says no, then that's it.
Unfortunately, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, so when you first got into Google, was it pretty shocking for you?
Absolutely. The number one thing that still shocked me was number of emails that you would get in a given day. Because Google is a global company, even as I'm sleeping, I'm getting emails from Singapore, Hong Kong, folks from India. I think the beauty of Google is our connectedness and our openness, right? And so we try to be less bureaucratic as much as possible and share as much of the information as we could, which means I get emails from all sorts of people across the company, globally, across 80 different countries that we have footprint, right? And yeah, I think my biggest learning curve was just learning to accept that I am just going to have to deal with the amount of emails that I get on a day-to-day basis. Wow. And I'm sure you would agree with that too.
Yeah, how many emails did you get a day?
My gosh, I don't know, upwards of hundreds.
Wow. Wow, and how do you prioritize that? That's a lot of emails.
Interestingly, we also have this class called Managing Your Inbox. It is a must class that you have to take, which walks you through all the different functionalities within Gmail that helps you to prioritize and highlight the most important emails that you get. Because quite frankly, you don't really need to read every single email in detail. You just want to understand what's the most important.
Okay, so let's now talk about your roles within Google, right? You started as a HR, right? And then you transitioned to sales role?
I did, yeah.
And then strategy?
Yeah.
How did you do that? Because those three roles are so different and it requires a different skill set. I mean, was it easy? Like, did you know people? How did you transfer internally?
It was definitely a journey of its own. And maybe it might be worthwhile. I had started out my career in HR in my previous company and within Google. As much as I had a blast, that was the only world that I knew. After about 3.5 years at Google, I asked myself the question, I was doing really well. And in fact, I was up for a promotion, but it was also the question of what am I really going for, right? I want to continue to learn, continue to push myself. And it got to a point where it's going to be now or never, right? Because generally, especially as you continue to progress in your career, the type of opportunities that you go for are going to be very limited to your domain expertise, right? Your domain. And so I felt like this was going to be the right moment. And so you want to be very thoughtful around what type of roles you want to get into. And at that time, I wanted to focus on the things that I liked. And so I started going through the list of what are the things that I enjoy in my HR world. And it came down to a couple things, which was I love to problem solve. I love working with clients. and I love selling. And so I decided, you know what, sales is going to be the thing. But the thing is, as I mentioned earlier on, if you get to a certain level, you need that experience. And so unless they're hiring someone that's right out of college, it's really hard to compete with people that have the same number of experiences. And so I went through then the next phase of, okay, I need to understand if I want to go for a particular role, I need to be able to sell myself. And how will I sell myself comes down to what is the manager, the hiring manager, the hiring team looking for in that particular role. And so I went on a journey of identifying some coaches within the company and mentors that were in the sales field. Even though I might not have that exact same experience, I could still tailor some of the experiences that I've had in different worlds to really build a holistic story of why they need to hire Amy over anybody else in this particular role. Yeah, so I pitched it, went through the entire interview process just like any other external candidates, and got the offer.
Wow, that's so impressive. It's like everything together with, networking and like brands about Amy. It's just selling yourself too, right? That's so impressive. Yeah, but then at the same time, you couldn't really do that if you didn't really have good reputation in your previous roles. How do you define a high-performing talent at Google or a global company like Google, What's your secret sauce?
Well, I'm still building my own too, but generally I think I would categorize it in three areas. And again, everyone's perspectives may be different. One, let's start off with the basis that generally Google tries to hire best of the best, right? So when you are hired into a role, it is very much expected that you're going to be excelling in your current position. So it is very much of a given that you are going to be good at what you do. Now, with that said, there are, I think, couple qualities that plays out really well. The first is the ability to thrive in ambiguity. We're such a fluid and open company, and it's very rare that you would go into a role and there are a specific list of job descriptions for that current role. Oftentimes, you're either pulled into different opportunities, those opportunities become projects become your day-to-day operations and roles, and it becomes your role. So oftentimes, it comes through a lot of identifying what the problem is and solutioning for it, because at the end of the day, if there's a problem, then let's fix it, right? And so that mindset of how do you make something out of nothing and navigate through those ambiguity to really solve for a problem that you think is worth solving. So I think that's the first thing that I would generally look for. The second thing is communication and collaboration. Every single role that I have come across in the last 6 years at Google have been requiring your ability to collaborate, partner, win the hearts and minds of the people that you work with, because you're not going to be able to get things done if you can actually get buy-in from your partners to be able to jump in and help you out. And so being able to clearly communicate, articulate your vision, your thought process, and why you think this is an important project or a problem to solve for, I think is going to be really critical. The third thing that I generally am really, really focused on a day-to-day basis is it's important on what you get done, but I think what's more important is how you get things done, which is you could be really great at your job.
I do agree with you.
Yeah, and that's why at Google there is so much emphasis on Googliness. I think there very rarely a day goes by where we don't talk about being Googly. And I think Googly is such a broad term that has different meanings for different people. But at the basis and the heart of it is we want to do things right. And we want to do things without being evil, right? And so at the end of it, I think it's all about how do we get things done the right way, and through understanding that it's all about building each other up and doing it together as a team.
Yep, I agree with you. You've been at Google for about 6 years now. But when I was at Google, I'm sure it's like that too, right? I mean, it's a really male-dominant industry, like just tech industry in general. I'm in tech right now. Most of them are male, though they try to hire more females and minorities. Did you have any obstacles that you had to overcome as a female Asian minority at Google?
Oh man, absolutely. I think not even just at Google, but as I reflect on my own journey, both personally and professionally, there have been many times where I was the only one, the only woman, the only, person of color, the only woman that's person of color. Having that association comes with, I think, definitely its own challenges. Oftentimes I would go into meetings or rooms where they were full of, white male in their 50s and 60s, and I am this random Asian girl walking in trying to, pitch an idea or talking about how Google is basically sharing my story as to why I matter. And it was challenging, I think, externally trying to being in a position where you felt like you were starting off at a disadvantage. But it doesn't really matter, right? Those things don't matter. It's the results that matter. And so I think I struggle with some of those disadvantages. My biggest challenge was externally being the only person in many cases, and internally the same thing too, right? Where there are some meetings where I would go and I am talked over, where my ideas are ignored, where I feel like my voice doesn't carry as much weight. And I remember there were quite a few moments where I walked out of a meeting immediately asking the question, wow, that was shitty. Was it me? Am I the problem? Am I not worth it? Am I actually a fit for this job? Was I hired for the right reasons? And those things, those doubts actually play off on you, right? Where it's a vicious cycle. But at one point, I realized, what am I asking for? From whom am I asking this validation? I don't really need validation or affirmation from anyone else but myself. Am I fit for this job? Am I good enough? Absolutely. Absolutely. So what is there to prove? There's nothing else I need to prove than to myself that I can do it.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing. What do you do when you get stressed out like that?
Over the years, what I have learned is we're all such complicated human beings, right? I think of every individual one of us as our own universe. I've gone through a lot of journey of really understanding who Amy as a person is and what are the things that really make me happy and what are the things that really pumps Amy up. And so, there are quite a few things that I've learned, especially over the last few years, that I've really gotten to know more about myself. And so a couple things is I love my morning routine. I'm a morning person. I like to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning. I like to have my coffee.
4
I like
a.m.?
to think through.
When do you go to sleep?
It depends, right? Yeah.
Do you go to sleep at 6 or?
No. It really depends. Yeah, I would go to bed anywhere between, I would say 9 to 11. Depends.
Yeah, that's actually pretty normal. And then you still wake up at 4. That's good 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just because I wake up at 4 doesn't necessarily mean that I have a drastically different schedule. It's just I want to wake up in the morning earlier than most people. So for me, the morning routine is really important in collecting my thoughts, getting ready for the day, doing my workout, and sweating it out so that I know yes, Amy is on a roll, I can do anything, sort of a mindset, right? And another thing that I really value personally is how do I continue to surround myself with people that inspire and push me to be a better version of myself? Badass women, ladies, and males, that inspire me, that push me, that remind me for the fact that we could all be a better version of ourselves, that I get a lot of great positive energies that we can build synergy with is super important.
Yeah, I do agree with you. That is very important. If you're surrounded by negative people, it really sucks the energy out of you, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. Just to wrap up, this is gonna be my final question. You know, a lot of people who are watching my videos, they are in their 20s and 30s, females. They watch my content because they want to grow together and they share the same values. They're motivated and they just want to do well in their life. Do you have any advice to those people, my friends who are watching this, especially those who are starting out their careers, fresh grads, and any tips or advice that you'd like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we're all in this journey together, right? And so I myself was also on my own journey of it. But if I could share a little bit about some of the things that I've learned in my journey. One, I think be curious, and it's okay if you make mistakes. You know, life is all about learning from our mistakes and growing from it. Don't be afraid, because I think personally, some of my biggest learning moments came from making mistakes and learning from it, right? Because we'll never be able to push the boundaries unless we fall and we learn to pick ourselves back up. The second thing that I would also say, life is always going to be hard, no matter what, right? There are going to be great moments, but there are also going to be moments where it's challenging. And in fact, you know, as we're even having this discussion, we don't know what those situations are, but we know that it's going to be really hard, like being in those situations. But I hope what you'll take away is no matter the challenge, there's always silver lining to it. Personally, I like to see myself and my life journey as my own movie, right? Where you are the producer, you are the director, and you are the main character of that movie. And ultimately, you get to decide whether it's going to be a Hollywood blockbuster or one of those movies that just gets produced on a videotape that no one watches. But the crux of it is, when you see those Hollywood blockbuster movies, you rarely see a main character that has everything from the get-go. And so anytime you're going through a challenge, always remember there's a reason. And this experience will build you up and build your resilience for that bigger and better things in life. It's about being curious, being an adventurer that you are within you, knowing that these hardships and challenges will be a moment that you'll look back to say, those are the moments that I've learned from, and enjoying all of those every moment of it, so that you are truly excited for your future, but you are living the day today, really being in the moment, enjoying the things that you have in front of you. Yeah.
와, 진짜 너무 멋있다. That's such a good tip of advice. 와, I just want to cry right now. 아, 진짜 너무 감사해요, 예미님. 아, 갑자기 한국말에. 아, 예미님이 이제 원래 한국 분인데 영어를 더 잘하셔서 이제 인터뷰를 영어로 진행했는데, 뭐 궁금하신 점 있으시면 여러분들 에이미님한테 댓글 많이 남겨주시고. Alright, thanks, Amy.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. 와, 여러분 잘 보셨나요? 제가 에이미님이랑 계속 이야기를 나눠보면서, 와, 내가 사회 초년생 때도 에이미님 같은 분을 알았다면 얼마나 좋을까, 이런 생각 계속 하면서 이야기를 나누었거든요. 그만큼 여러분들에게도 도움이 되셨으면 좋겠고, 이 영상이 도움이 되셨다면 좋아요랑 구독 꼭 눌러주시고, 그리고 에이미님하고 저한테 궁금한 점 있으시면 편하게 댓글로 달아주세요. 그럼 우리 다음에 또 봬요. 안녕.